today I'm going to be reacting to her YouTube story, and it's called My Family Left Me to Die, and I thought that was really interesting because I like mysteries.
My volleyball coach slid a piece of paper across her desk, and I read the words, Full Athletic Scholarship and Division 1, and my hands started shaking. The first thing I said was, my parents will never let me accept this. She stared at me across her desk. This is a full ride. Why on earth not? Because my brother just got cut from JV basketball for the second time, and if I walk in with this letter, they're going to make me turn it down so he doesn't feel bad.
Why is always her YouTube stories like the sibling gotta be the better one? Like, why does every single time the sibling gotta be the better one? That's kind of rude. those are bad parents. Like, why would they even get a second child then? If they only wanted to focus on one. I don't get these parents. They just wanted the children to suffer. Like, how rude is that? Like, what? I will never let my children suffer. I want 5 kids. In case you're wondering. I want 5 kids.
They made me quit varsity soccer, throw a track meet, and hide every report card I've ever gotten because Brody didn't get one first. Coach leaned forward. You go home and tell them this is happening. I walked in holding the letter, and my parents were at the kitchen table with Brody. Mom was rubbing his back, and Dad was on the phone about the JV cuts. I got a full scholarship, Division 1. Paperwork is due Friday. Mom didn't look up, and Dad said, not now. And I stood there holding the biggest news of my life and felt it shrink in my hands. I waited 3 days, and the deadline crept closer, and nobody brought it up once. And then Dad sat me down after dinner and told me to decline, and something inside my chest cracked. I argued until my voice went raw. My mom said, sometimes being part of a family means making sacrifices. I sat in my car before school and called Coach with my hands shaking. I can't accept the scholarship. She was quiet for a long time. Is someone making you do this? I said no, and hung up and stared at the windshield until second period. Brody's birthday came around, and my parents threw him a party with 30 friends and a DJ and a brand new car in the driveway, and my dad gave a speech about how Brody was the toughest kid he knew. I stood in the corner of the backyard watching him blow out candles, and I felt like I was watching it from underwater. At dinner, Brody was going on about how next season he'd be a starter for sure, and something inside me snapped. You're not going to be a starter, Brody. You got cut twice from JV, not varsity, the team they let freshmen on. And while you were getting cut, I was being offered a full ride to a DI school. But Mom and Dad made me turn it down because they were worried about your feelings. So you got a car and a party, and I got nothing because this entire family revolves around making sure you
Hey, she's doing the right thing. Like, even though it's the wrong thing, the right thing, and that's like what I would do. I would be crashing out. Real crashing out. I would have been saying a lot of things worse, so she's taking it calm. Like, not even to the next level. She's taking it really calm and then the right way. Oh, I would have taken it on like the way next level, like that, you know? I'll just do that. Because I would just like do more than saying those words, because I would have been crashing out.
Never have to feel bad about being mediocre at everything you try. The table went dead quiet, and Brody's face went red, and he opened his mouth, but nothing came out. My mom put her hand on my arm. She has a point. The scholarship was a big deal, and we maybe should have handled it Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough. We're going camping this weekend. Deep woods. And Brody is leading because he's the one who needs to prove himself. Brody...
Oh, so that's the dad's fault or something? Or like, well, or is it the parent? Is it the dad's fault or is it the parent? I feel like because mom took her side, and I think it's the dad's fault. So, I don't know. Sorry.
Puffed up immediately. I'll plan the whole thing. I have a plan. Brody can't even read a compass. I said enough. Dad was on his feet with his face red and a vein standing out on his forehead. Mom looked at me across the table with an expression that said, I'm sorry, but her mouth didn't open. We pulled into the trailhead parking lot, and the first thing I saw was a sign in red letters. Bear Country. Secure all food. Carry deterrent. We had no deterrent and no bear canister, and a knot formed in my stomach as I read the sign. Then I looked at the ground, and my heart started beating faster because there were fresh tracks in the soft dirt with large paw prints and claw marks in front of each toe. There are bear tracks right here at the trailhead. Dad turned to Brody. What do you think, bud? Brody glanced down. Old. Seems fine to me. Dad clapped him on the shoulder. Lead the way. After about an hour of hiking, I realized I hadn't seen a trail marker in a long time, and the last blaze was 50 yards behind us. We missed a turn. Dad didn't look at me. Let your brother figure it out. I reached for the map, and Mom intercepted my hand and walked it to Brody, and something hot flared in my chest because even my mother wouldn't let me help. He held it upside.
Okay, so it's the parents' fault. It is the parents' fault. The mom's just trying to be on the daughter's good side, but I think it's both parents' fault that they're mean. They're both mean. Because, like, what? My dad would never act like that. Or my mom. Because, like, what?
Down and pointed ahead, right on track. He picked a campsite in a flat stretch between two ridges, and the second I dropped my pack, I felt smooth river rocks under my boots and saw silt lines on the brush. We can't camp here. This is a stream bed. Mom started to say, maybe we should listen to her, and Dad cut her off. It hasn't rained in weeks. Stop.
Oh, the mom's just scared of her husband. That's what. Oh, okay. I mean, the mom's pretty scared of her husband, so I don't think it's really her fault, but it is kind of her fault. So, yeah.
I lay in the tent with a sick feeling in my stomach, listening to the wind. I was half asleep when a roar jerked me awake, distant but getting louder fast, and the tent zipper was already underwater by the time I ripped it open. Brown water was up to my knees and rising, and I have never been more terrified in my life. I grabbed Mom and dragged her uphill while Brody stood in knee-deep water watching his phone float away. We huddled on a rock shelf, soaking wet and shaking, and I watched our cooler and half our food tumble away in the dark. When the sun came up, I climbed down to what was left of camp and knelt in the mud, and there they were again. The same paw prints from the trailhead, same size, same claw marks, pressed deep into the soft ground, right where our tents had been. I looked up and saw scratch marks on a tree 50 yards from where we'd stored the food. My heart hammered because whatever this was had smelled our supplies and walked right through our camp while we slept 20 feet away. We need to go east. State roads are that direction. Brody shook his head. Shortcut through the valley. I have a plan. My parents followed him, and I stood there with my mouth open because we had just nearly drowned because of his last plan, and they were doing it again. The valley narrowed into a ravine, and Mom fell, and her ankle folded under her, and the snap echoed off the rock walls, and she screamed, and a wave of real fear hit me, because that sound...
No. It did not snap up by itself. She did it herself. She went with her toes. She went... Because I'm not showing my own dogs. Like, what? You're not looking at those. This. Look.
The valley narrowed into a ravine, and Mom fell, and her ankle folded under her, and the snap echoed off the rock walls, and she screamed, and a wave of real fear hit me, because that sound carries for miles, and I knew what was out here listening for it. My throat was cracked and raw, and I stopped walking and listened and heard running water off to the left, and I pushed through brush and dropped to my knees at a creek and drank straight from it, and filled every bottle we had. Brody said, I was about to go that direction. And Dad said, good ears, buddy. And I stood there holding the water I'd found, and I felt so invisible I could have screamed. Mom mouthed the words, thank you, while they weren't watching, and my eyes stung because she'd had to do it in secret. Then I smelled something rotting and pushed through brush into a destroyed campsite with a cooler raked open by claw marks and a tent shredded to ribbons and dark stains on a knocked-over chair, and my whole body went cold because the claw marks on the surrounding trees were at 7 feet, the same height as every mark I'd found since we started. We need to leave now. Brody grabbed tent poles from the wreckage. Cool, free hiking sticks. I pushed ahead through the brush, and my feet hit packed dirt, and I looked up and saw blazes on trees and boot prints in the mud, and then 2 hikers coming toward us with loaded packs and a GPS clipped to a chest strap, and my heart leapt with hope. I started toward them, and Brody cut me off. We're good. Scenic route. I watched them disappear, and something inside me broke. Mom grabbed Dad's arm. Maybe we should have talked to them. Brody made a judgment call. I watched Mom's mouth close and her hand drop off his arm, and I felt a surge of frustration so sharp it made my hands shake because she kept trying and he kept shutting her down. Rain started coming down, and Brody hadn't packed a tarp, so I built a lean-to in 20 minutes, and Mom crawled under and said Brody was just about to build one, and I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Brody knelt over a pile of wet leaves and struck match after match until half the matchbook was gone, and I couldn't watch anymore. So I took what was left and shaved dry bark from inside a dead log and had flames going in 2 minutes. And Dad said, "Brody softened it up for you." And I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. Mom caught my eye across the fire and shook her head. I splinted Mom's ankle with sticks and strips from my shirt, and she grabbed my hand. "You're good at this," she whispered, and my throat tightened because all I'd ever wanted was for someone in this family to look at me like that. Then Brody coughed, and her head snapped toward him, and the moment was gone. Brody woke up and knelt beside Mom and grabbed her splint to fix it and twisted her ankle, and she screamed, and I wanted to shake him until his teeth rattled. I was just trying to help. Dad gave his last granola bar to Brody, and when I reached for one, Mom said, "Brody's bigger," and she couldn't look at me when she said it. And I felt my eyes burn because my own mother was starving me to feed the person who got us lost. I hadn't eaten in over a day, and my hands were trembling, and I found edible plants I recognized from camp and ate them behind a rock where nobody could tell me to give them to Brody. Brody was the one who spotted the bright red berries on a bush and shoved a handful in his mouth before I could stop him. "Don't! Those are baneberries." "How would you know that?" "Because I learned it at camp." An hour later, he was on his knees vomiting, and I gave him half my water because nobody else would, and Mom rubbed his back and said, "Poor thing." And I wanted to ask where my poor thing was when I'd been starving for 2 days, but I didn't say anything. I knelt beside Mom to check her ankle, and the heat was radiating off it from 6 inches away, with red streaks past her knee, and her eyes glassy and unfocused, and I felt panic rising because I knew what those streaks meant. "She needs antibiotics today," Dad's voice cracked. "Don't be dramatic." Mom looked at me. "How bad is it really?" "Bad. If those red lines keep spreading, she could go septic." She nodded like she trusted me even if Dad wouldn't, and I packed the ankle in creek mud with shaking hands because I was 17 years old, trying to keep my mother alive, and I had no idea if it was working. The sun went down and the temperature dropped, and Dad tried to stand and his legs buckled, and he went down hard on his side, and his skin was gray and cold, and his speech was slurred, and I felt real terror watching his body shut down in front of me. I dragged him to the fire and wrapped him in everything we had and held a water bottle to his mouth while his hands couldn't grip it. The fire popped and settled, and Brody rolled over and looked at me through the glow. "Do you actually know how to get us out?" "Yes, since day one." "Don't tell Mom and Dad I asked that." I felt a wave of disgust because even now, the thing he was most afraid of was them finding out he wasn't in charge. Hours later, deep in the darkest part of the night, something heavy moved through the brush with slow, deliberate footfalls that I could feel in the ground, and every nerve in my body was screaming. I was the only one awake between whatever was out there and my sleeping family. I could hear it breathing, deep, rhythmic huffing, and a branch snapped under its weight, and it started circling the edge of the firelight without crossing in. I fed the fire with shaking hands until the flames climbed high and the huffing stopped, but I could still feel it out there waiting, and I didn't close my eyes the rest of the night. When the sky finally started to lighten, I walked the perimeter and found fresh tracks 20 feet from where Mom had been lying, bigger than any of the others, pressed deep into the soft ground during the darkest hour, and my hands were shaking because it had been close enough to touch her while I sat there thinking I was keeping us safe. Brody decided to cross a swollen creek, running brown and fast with debris spinning in the current, and he slipped and went under for 3 seconds before catching a branch. "Easy." I wanted to scream at him because he had almost just drowned and he was calling it easy. Mom couldn't cross with her ankle, and Dad tried to carry her, and they both went down, and I waded into the freezing current, and the cold slammed into my chest like a wall, and I grabbed Mom's arm and screamed that I had her and pulled her to the bank. Brody looked at the other side. "Actually, we should have stayed over there." I stared at him and couldn't even form words because we had just risked our lives crossing a flooded creek twice for nothing. We crossed back, and Mom collapsed, sobbing and looking at her. I was more afraid than I'd been during the flood or the bear because she looked like she was giving up. I stacked rocks into an SOS, and Brody walked over and kicked them apart. "We don't need rescue." I wanted to scream because my mother could die tonight, and he just destroyed the one thing that might save her. Her infection is past her knee. If it hits her bloodstream, she could die. If you would just trust me. A helicopter appeared to the east, and I jumped up, waving my arms and screaming, and Brody grabbed my arm and yanked it down. "Just a news chopper. It could be search and rescue." Nobody's looking for us. The sound faded over the ridge, and I stood there with my arms still in the air, wanting to scream, because that might have been our only chance, and he killed it. I climbed the tallest tree and broke through the canopy and saw a fire road 3 miles east, brown dirt through green trees, and my heart pounded so hard with hope, I almost fell. There's a fire road 3 miles east, and I can see it. Dad turned to Brody, and Brody looked west. I have a plan. I watched my family walk west and felt something between fury and despair. Mom looked back at me over her shoulder, and I could see on her face that she knew I was right, and it hurt to watch her follow Dad anyway, because she was choosing peace over her daughter one more time. We hit a cliff face within the hour, 50 feet of solid granite with nowhere to go, and I wanted to sink to the ground because we had walked an hour away from a road I could see from a tree, and my mother was dying. Mom sank to the ground, shaking. You've been guessing. Map's gone, phone's dead, you turned away hikers, stopped a helicopter, kicked apart my SOS, and Mom is dying. Dad stepped between us. He's doing his best. His best is going to kill her. Mom spoke from the ground with more force than I'd heard from her the entire trip. She's right. She's been right about everything. Dad spun toward her. Don't undermine him. Our daughter has been keeping us alive for 3 days, and we haven't listened to her once. I looked at Mom and felt a rush of gratitude so strong it almost knocked me over because she had finally said it out loud. We backtracked with 3 packs on my back and Mom on my arm and every muscle burning, and I was running on nothing but anger because I was carrying this family on my back the same way I'd been carrying them my entire life. Brody walked ahead unburdened. Can we pick up the pace? I almost laughed because I was carrying his pack and his mother and his responsibility, and he wanted me to go faster. I smelled bear scat on the trail, fresh and warm, and saw claw marks at 7 feet matching every mark since the trailhead, and a jolt of pure fear shot through me because it was the same animal and it had been following us for days. We need to move right now, Dad. Stop trying to scare your brother. I felt something snap inside me because I was holding evidence that we were about to be attacked and he was still protecting Brody's feelings. There is a bear that has been following us since we got here. The trailhead, the flood camp, the destroyed campsite, the thing circling us last night. It is the same animal. Brody glanced at the marks. Old. Besides, I have a plan if we see a bear. A thick animal musk hit me on the wind, heavy enough to taste, and I turned slowly, and 50 yards through the trees, I saw a black shape moving between the trunks with its head low and its shoulders rolling, and it was coming straight toward us. Bear! It locked onto us, and every thought in my brain collapsed into one word. Run. Brody whispered, "Nobody panic. I have a plan." The bear charged at full sprint with its jaws open and a sound from deep in its chest that I felt vibrate through the ground before my ears caught it. I ran before my brain finished the thought, and I was faster than everyone, and I always had been, and the fire road was ahead through the trees, and I sprinted for it with everything my body had left after 3 days of carrying this family. "Slow down," Mom screamed. "Wait for your brother. Stop running ahead," Dad yelled. "You're going to make him feel bad." A bear was charging, and they were still worried about Brody's feelings. Brody gasping behind them, screaming, "Everybody stop! I have a plan!" I didn't stop, and I didn't slow down. For the first time in my life, I ran as fast as my body would go, and I didn't apologize. Branches whipped my face, and my lungs were on fire. But every race I'd thrown, every team I'd quit, every scholarship I'd surrendered was behind me, and I was fast. My feet hit packed dirt, and I almost cried with relief, and I sprinted to a ranger station and slammed through the door. My family is half a mile east being chased by a bear. My mom can't run, and her leg is infected, and my dad is hypothermic. Please. They found them on a boulder with the bear circling below, and the rangers drove it off. They loaded Mom into a helicopter, and I watched it lift off the ground and disappear over the trees with my mother inside it. At the hospital, they rushed her straight into surgery, and I stood in the hallway watching them wheel her through the double doors with IV antibiotics already running into her arm. Dad was on a stretcher with heated blankets piled on top of him because his body temperature had dropped dangerously low. Brody was on a bed getting fluids. I sat in a plastic chair between their rooms, and I was fine, which felt strange because I had been terrified for 3 days, and now it was suddenly quiet, and I didn't know what to do with my hands. The ranger stayed to file his report, and he looked at my dad and said, "Your daughter saved your lives getting help when she did. Smart kid, but your son kept saying he had a plan out there. I'm curious. What was the plan?" Every head turned to Brody, and he looked up completely serious. Bears chase the slowest member of the group. You let the slowest one fall behind, and the rest survive. Basic triage. I looked at Mom in her hospital bed with her destroyed ankle and her IV drip and realized what he was saying. She stared at him, and her face went through shock and confusion and landed on something that looked like her heart breaking in real time. Your plan was to let it eat me? It's called survival strategy, Mom. Nobody in the room made a sound. The ranger looked at Dad. Sir, your daughter built shelters, started fires, found water, splinted your wife's leg, identified poisonous plants, spotted bear activity from the trailhead, and ran for help while your son led you off trail, through a flood zone, past a bear feeding site, into a dead end. And his emergency plan was to sacrifice his mother. She had 2 summers of wilderness training. Why wasn't she navigating? Dad opened his mouth and closed it, and looked at Brody, and then at me, and had nothing to say. Because he needed something to feel confident about, I said. You put him in charge because he needed a win, and it almost killed all of us. Mom turned to me, and her eyes were wet, and her chin was trembling. You gave up your scholarship for him. You quit soccer for him. You threw races for him. You hid your grades for him. And then you carried all 3 of us through those woods for 3 days while we told you to be quiet and let your brother lead. Yeah, and when the bear charged, they told you to slow down so he wouldn't feel bad. Yeah, Mom, they did. She reached across and took my hand with both of hers, and her grip was so tight it almost hurt. I should have said something. Every single time your father shut me down, I should have fought harder. I watched them take things from you your whole life, and I let it happen because it was easier than fighting, and I will never forgive myself for that. Her voice broke, and tears were running down her face, and she squeezed my hand tighter. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt my mother choose me. Not because Brody was asleep or distracted, because she was looking at me and saying what she should have said years ago, and she meant every word. Dad sat on the other side of the room staring at the floor. He didn't say a word. He didn't have one.
Done. Ew. Add. Disgusting. Oop, it's done.